Australia made me realise this about the UK. Now, I've been living in Australia for about 2.5 years. I did actually go back to the UK for a visit for a couple of weeks last Christmas, and a lot of things stood out to me which I completely forgot about. And it's fair to say that 2.5 years in Australia has made me realise so much about the UK that you never realised before. I always talk about that the UK is such a bubble. In the UK, and when you've never really lived out of it, you don't really know what else there is, and everything just feels like everything you know is that little bubble that's the UK. It's not till you escape that, go and live in another country. I lived in Australia, I still live in Australia, but it's not until you do that that you get an outside look on that bubble you once lived in. And some of the things you realise, yeah, are pretty crazy. We're gonna go into that in today's video. Before we get into it, make sure you give it a like and subscribe to the channel. And yeah, let's get into it. Point number one is the UK feels like the definition of the rat race. Now, I feel like every country obviously has its kind of rat race kind of vibes, especially in the cities where everyone is rushing to work, rushing back home, working their 9 to 5. It happens in other places, of course it still happens in Australia, but honestly, I cannot believe how much of the rat race the UK feels like. I don't know why, out of everywhere I've been, the UK just feels like that. It feels like in the UK, everyone is very closed-minded and they all do the same thing. Everyone's a bit like a sheep. They get brought up and they do what everyone else is doing because it feels normal and it feels safe. Hence why it feels like the rat race, because I think it feels like everyone's doing the same thing. There is a minority of people that do go and do bigger things. They move abroad like I did. That's definitely the minority in the UK. The majority of people do just live the same lives. Go to their 9 to 5 job, go to the pub on the weekends. It's all I was really surrounded by back home. No disrespect to anyone in the UK, but it feels like everyone's doing the same thing. But spending a lot of time in Australia, I don't know why it just feels nowhere near the same levels. It feels like everyone enjoys life a lot more, which is a massive positive of Australia. And people, I feel like, do different things and they have a lot more going on in their lives than just work and the pub on the weekends. I feel like Aussies tend to enjoy life a lot more, and there's way less of a rat race culture in Australia. I feel like in the UK, everyone is obsessed over work, trying to buy things they can't really afford. I don't know, in Australia, it's nowhere near the case. Everyone, I feel like, work is not a priority and they really enjoy their lives. The UK, once you escape it, you realise, wow, everyone's doing the same thing. And especially when you go back after a couple of years away, yeah, everyone is doing the same thing. It's crazy. And that leads me on to my next point, and that is that nothing changes about the UK at all after being away. Obviously, little things here and there. This is one of the reasons I encourage everyone should live abroad, travel, do something a bit different, especially in their 20s, because, for example, look at the things I've done over the last 3 years. I'll leave a little highlight reel on the screen. It's a lot, do you know what I mean? It hasn't cost me loads, I've worked hard for a lot of it, but I've lived a very good life over the last couple of years. Seen so many things, done so many incredible things, and live life. And then you go back to somewhere like the UK where you cannot believe, you think that because you've done so much and you've changed so much as a person, it's gonna be the same for everyone back home. They'll have done the same, but you go back home and people are working the same jobs. People are doing the exact same thing as when you left. And it's crazy to think that, you know, you make so much progress and have so much fun, but you go back home and nothing has changed. It's a weird thing, and I expected nothing to have changed much, but I actually couldn't believe like how little things had changed, considering how much I'd done in the space of 3 years away. Point number 3 is one that I definitely didn't expect, and that was that everything felt tiny. I don't know if this is something specific to Australia, because Australia is a massive country. I don't know, but everything felt tiny going back to the UK. The area I lived in, my house felt tiny. The roads felt tiny. I don't know if it's to do with Australian roads that are just massive and there's loads of like lanes, maybe, but the roads, everything, the little country lanes kind of thing felt absolutely tiny. I think in Australia there is a lot more big long straight roads, especially when you're traveling around the country. That's definitely not the case in the UK. There's a lot more little narrow roads, winding roads, compared to in Australia where I don't know, everything feels bigger. Obviously it's a massive country, but I don't know why going back to the UK, everything felt tiny. The obvious one is that Australia is way bigger, so flying across the country will take you like 4 or 5 hours in Australia. In England, it will take you less than an hour. So the difference in size is obviously massive, but it was weird that everything felt so tiny after spending time in Australia where, I don't know, maybe everything is just bigger over here. The next point is that it was so busy everywhere. In Australia, the cities are busy, of course, but I feel like once you get out of the city, it is quiet. And even in Australian cities, there is very quiet areas. Like once you're out of the kind of CBD in Australian cities, like they're very quiet. I'm in Perth right now and it's like when you escape the city and even just have a little walk out of the city, like it's just really quiet. There's not many people. Obviously Australians' population is way less. For the size of the country, there's hardly anyone compared to the UK. But this was very noticeable going back. London literally felt like crazy busy. I've traveled all over Australia and yeah, it's big and it's empty, and going to Australian towns and cities, they are nowhere near as busy as London is. I couldn't believe going through like the train stations and everything in central London. It was literally next level compared to what it's like in Australia. And overall, it just felt like there was people everywhere. There were so many more cars on the roads, busy trains. It felt like you couldn't get away from people, sort of. In Australia, it's very peaceful and you get very used to having that peaceful life. You're not always, there's not people everywhere. Even in the city, it's pretty chill. The UK, that's not the case at all. It felt extremely busy being back in the UK. The next point is that it looked very rundown and dirty. I did a video which did pretty well and it was comparing UK cities with Australian cities, and the biggest difference between the two is Australian cities are very clean, very safe and very well kept. In the UK, I mean, just look at the state of UK cities at the moment. They're dirty, they're run down, the crime's bad. They're nowhere near as good as Australian cities in my opinion, but the biggest thing that stood out was how run down the UK looked. Towns, cities, the buildings looked old, derelict. It was just grey, it just looked a bit miserable. In Australia, everything's modern. Of course, it hasn't got as much history, it's a lot more modern, but it's cleaner and it's well kept. In the UK, it looked like everything for the last 10 years had just been neglected. It looked really run down after spending time in Australia. And the last point is, it felt weird walking around my hometown and knowing everyone in my area, bumping into neighbours. This was something which actually felt weird because being in Australia, you don't know anyone, so you get very used to going to town, going to the city, walking down your street. You don't know any of the neighbours, you're just in your own kind of bubble, and it's kind of cool because it allows you to really not care about what anyone thinks because you don't know anyone. Going back home and walking down my street and bumping into like 3 of my neighbours was weird, especially being in Australia where that's not the case at all. You don't know anyone in Australia. It's almost like you're suddenly conscious of how you're acting and what you're doing as soon as you move back because you know everyone, which is the danger of staying and why I encourage people to leave and explore the world, because you can have that freedom and you stop caring what people think because you don't know everyone. But it was nice, to be fair. At the same time, walking down my street, knowing people, going into my local area, knowing people there, it's nice, but yeah, it felt weird. So they are some things which Australia made me realise about the UK. It's fair to say that if you spend time in Australia, it will definitely open your eyes a lot to the UK. Living abroad in general, but I feel like I can only speak from my experience, which has been mostly in Australia. Yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments on this one. If you're from the UK planning to move to Australia, definitely do it. It's one of the best things you'll ever do. If you do need help, check out my guide, top of the description. And yeah, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.